the Red Ripper, the Butcher of Rostov, or the Rostov Ripper. This case took place in the Ukraine at the time that it was part of the Soviet Union. So I am going to get straight into the case, but before I do, I just want to say this does involve murder, sexual assault and mutilation. So please, if that is going to make you uncomfortable or it's not something that you want to listen to, please click off the video now. So, Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo was born on the 16th of October 1936 in a place called Yablokny in Ukraine, while it was part of the Soviet Union. Chikatilo was born with a condition called hydrocephalus. This is water on the brain. This then in his future led to urinary issues as well as impotence. This would all be quite prevalent in this case down the line. So whenever he was born, there had been a famine a few years prior, between 1932 and 1933. It was called the Terror Famine or the Holodomor. This means to kill by starvation. So millions of Ukrainian people died during this famine, and as of 2006 it has been known by the Ukrainian people to be an act of genocide by the Soviet government. Just before I carry on, I am just going to say a lot of these names I may very well mispronounce, and I do want to apologise because I wish I could pronounce them right, but I just don't know if I am. Okay, so throughout his childhood, Chikatilo kind of saw a lot of deprivation. He didn't really, the family lived in a hut that was made up of one room, and behind the hut there was land which they could use to grow their own food, and at times it was kind of, the food was very scarce. There was a lot of malnutrition, and he actually claimed that he only tasted bread at the age of 12. So following this famine, because there was a lot of starvation in the country at the time, Chikatilo's mother actually told him a story of his older brother, or supposed older brother, called Stefan, who was kidnapped and cannibalised by neighbours at the age of 4. There's no evidence to show that Chikatilo did actually have an older brother. It's believed that this may just have been a story to kind of stop him from straying too far. So in 1941, the USSR went to war with Germany in World War II, and Chikatilo's father, Roman Chikatilo, was drafted into the Red Army to go to war against Germany. And during this time, Andrei Chikatilo had seen much of the aftermath of the war, or shootings and bombings, and there was actually an incident where he and his mother had to stand and watch their home be burned to the ground. While his father was away, Andrei Chikatilo shared a bed with his mother, and because he had quite a bad bedwetting issue, he would wet the bed frequently, and he was given quite a lot of beatings by his mother. He later would have said that his mother was quite a harsh woman, and he also had a sister who had said the same thing. Their father was a kind and loving man, and their mother was unforgiving and very, very harsh. So actually, his sister, who was called Tatiana, was born in 1943. She was born at a time where, while Roman Chikatilo was away at war, the timing was very unlikely that he was the father of Tatiana. It's believed that Anna Chikatilo witnessed his mother's rape because they shared a room. There was only one room in their home. So Tatiana also had said that her father was a kind and loving man, so as far as I can tell, she was raised by a Roman Chikatilo and there was never any difference made. She was never kind of made to feel any strange about who her father may have been. So during the war, Roman Chikatilo was captured by the Germans after becoming injured. He was then held in a prisoner of war camp where he was then tormented by people from his community after he was released because of being captured by Germany. He was thought of as a coward and a traitor because he had let himself be caught. This would then cause problems for Andrei Chikatilo in his future too. He started school in 1944 where he was bullied for his stature. He was malnourished and he would faint quite a lot because of the malnourishment. He was very shy, actually quite painfully shy, and his father had a reputation of being a coward and a traitor, and for all of these reasons Andrei Chikatilo was bullied throughout his school years. As a teenager, Andrei had good grades in school. He became the editor for his newspaper in his high school. At about the age of 17, he then discovered that he had an impotence problem, and there was an instant where he had grabbed a friend of his sister who was 11 years old, and because she was struggling against him, he actually ejaculated because of the struggle, and from there I think he learned that he became sexually aroused by the struggle. After finishing high school, Andrei Chikatilo went on to apply for a place in Moscow State University. He had done well in his exams, but he was unable to be placed in the university. He wasn't given a place, and he had actually made quite a lot of excuses. He said he thought this was because his father's reputation was so bad that he didn't get this place in the university, but it turned out that it was because of his grades. He didn't pass the test to get into the university. From there he then went on to a place called Krosk, where he became a labourer while he was studying to become a communications tech, and he actually started his first relationship with a girl who he remained with for the next 18 months. This girl, I believe her name was actually Tatiana as well. She split up with Andrei Chikatilo after 18 months, and during their relationship they had attempted to have a sexual relationship throughout on a number of occasions, and because it was not possible for Andrei to maintain an erection, he wasn't able to have a sexual relationship with her, and it's believed that this is the reason why she split up with him. So between 1957 and 1960, Chikatilo then he went on and carried out his compulsory military service. He served in East Berlin as a KGB communications unit. He also served in East Asia on I think it's like a border force type of thing. And whenever he returned from war, I think it was in 1960, he then actually joined the Communist Party. He moved back to his hometown when he returned from war and moved in with his parents again. He then started to date a girl who was from his hometown. She had, during this time, they were unable to have a sexual relationship, and this girl actually spoke to a few of her friends, and in a completely innocent way she was asking advice was making fun of him, and he felt like people were talking behind his back about his problem. And the couple then split up, and he left his hometown and didn't ever want to go back. Later that year, he actually found himself a job as a communications engineer in a place called Rostov. Now, his sister moved in with him, and because she had her concerns about his awkwardness around women and that he had never really had a relationship, she wanted to try setting him up with someone, and she arranged a date for him and a lady whose name I am going to read to you because I don't want to mispronounce it any more than I need to. So, her name was Feodosia Odnicheva. She was known as Faina, so I'm going to call her Faina throughout this. He then went on to marry Faina in 1963, still unable to have a sexual relationship, but they did go on to conceive 2 children. Now, a few of the things I read about this, Andrei had claimed that throughout their relationship they were unable to have a sexual relationship, but in order for her to conceive, he used his hands to move things to where they needed to be. Whether there is any truth to that, I don't know. Personally, I think a lot of the interviews that he had and a lot of the things that he said were vulgar, and I think maybe he did get some kind of kick out of that part of all of this, so it's hard to know what is the truth and what's not. In 1971, Andrei Chikatilo had actually studied to become a teacher. He went on and started teaching in 1971. He didn't last very long at teaching because he had received quite a number of complaints of inappropriate behaviour around children, and his first incident of an assault on one of his students was a 15-year-old female student was swimming in a lake, and Andrei Chikatilo swam up to her and started to grope her inappropriately. He then ejaculated while she was struggling against him. He received a number of complaints for different instances like this. He was caught by another teacher fondling himself in the classroom. He had actually trapped another student in a room. There was a lot. Now, at the end of this, in the first school that he worked in, he was given an ultimatum. He was told, you either leave quietly or we will fire you, and he chose to leave quietly. He then went on to teach in another school and do the same thing over again. His teaching career ended in 1981, and this was due to an excessive amount of complaints for child molestation. He then began to work as a supply clerk in a factory that produced construction materials. This involved extensive travel and actually kind of became one of his tools for picking up victims. So, his first known murder occurred on the 22nd of December 1978 in a place called Shakti. It was a young girl whose name was Yelena Zakhanova. She was 9 years old. Yelena was taken to a hut that was out of the way where Chikatilo attempted to sexually assault her. He was unable to, and out of, I think, anger, he started to stab her and strangle her while he was was stabbing her in the stomach, he actually ejaculated, and I suppose discovered his excitement by this, and he strangled Yelena to death. Now, in this case, there were actually a number of different things which pointed to Chikatilo. There was blood evidence found, as well as that there were eyewitnesses who had seen the young girl walking with a man whose description matched Chikatilo. But his wife actually gave him an alibi for where he was that night. The police arrested a 25-year-old man. His name was Alexander Kravchenko. Alexander Kravchenko had recently been released from prison for a rape. The police questioned Alexander, his wife, and a neighbour, all of which had said they were together the night that this murder occurred. Because of the extensive questioning, all three of them were coerced by the police into changing their story, and the police then sentenced Alexander to death for the murder of Yelena. He was executed in 1984, and for the next 3 years everything was quiet. There were no more murders for the next 3 years. On the 3rd of September 1981, another young girl, Larissa Tchenko, she was 17 years old, she was lured into a forest by Chikatilo. He had actually invited her into the forest for drinking and relaxing. This was known to have meant sex. So whenever he'd taken her into the forest, he attacked her and attempted again to sexually assault her. Being unable to, he got angry. He shoved mud and leaves into her mouth, and it's believed that because she was a 17-year-old girl, she noticed that he was having difficulties and may have been making fun of him, and he put leaves and mud into her mouth. He then proceeded to batter her and strangle her to death. He then mutilated her body with a stick, and I believe he used the stick to mutilate her genitals. He then tore off one of her nipples with his teeth. This would become a common kind of thread in all of these murders. Another common sign that it was Chikatilo was that he would cut out his victims' eyeballs, and this was because of an old Russian belief that he had that the face of the murderer would be ingrained into the eyes of the victim. On the 12th of June 1982, a 13-year-old girl called Lyubov Buryuk was walking home from a bus stop where Chikatilo came across her and dragged her into a secluded area. He then proceeded to attack her again, attempting to sexually assault her, and in all of these cases he ejaculated during the struggle. This young girl was stabbed 22 times, and again her genitals were mutilated and her eyes were removed. Because of the beliefs of the Soviet Union at the time, they believed that a serial killer could not exist in a communist state. So for the last few murders, they had kind of been brushing it under the carpet. They had been making sure that the media weren't getting any wind of it, and it wasn't going out to the newspapers or anything. And now after this third murder, they then started to look at the murders and realise that they were so similar and that it had to be a serial killer, and they finally admitted that yes, they had a serial killer on their hands and they needed to do something about it. Between July and September of 1982, as well as cutting out her eye. Now, Chikatilo didn't just target female victims, he did actually also have a number of male victims, one of which was a 14-year-old boy. His name was Sergei Markov, and Sergei had been stabbed over 70 times, and he had been emasculated. In 1983, a police officer named Major Mikhail Fedistov from Moscow was put on to this case. They actually had started an investigation which they named Operation Forest Path, and this was because a lot of the murders had occurred along forest paths. At the beginning, they actually were looking at a lot of mentally ill suspects, as well as sexual predators, anyone who had a previous conviction for a sex offence, as well as homosexual men. I believe this was because of the male victims, which it's interesting to see the difference in different governments and at different times, because now it's hard to believe that anywhere would have such a narrow kind of minded view on who a suspect could be. Anyway, so at one of the crime scenes, a semen sample had been taken and tested, and they found this to be type AB. They believed that the blood type would be the same as the semen type, so they believed that they were looking for a perpetrator with type AB blood. Now, throughout the investigation, they actually received a number of false confessions from men who are mentally ill. It was after extensive questioning, so I think a lot of these confessions had been kind of coercion, or men who were just exhausted and wanted to get out of the room. On the 13th of September 1984, two police officers actually had been watching Chikatilo trying to pick up women. He was seen going from woman to woman, pretty much just trying to get whichever one would come with him to come along. Now, because of his suspicious behaviour, he was picked up by the police and arrested. He was found to have a rope, as well as a knife and a tub of Vaseline. At the time of his arrest, Chikatilo actually had a charge against him of theft by a previous employer. So the police had taken samples from Chikatilo. They'd taken a sample of his blood. They had found that he was type A, so they had kind of struck him off the list of being involved in these murders, and he served 3 months in prison for the theft, but was then released just to go back to normal life. So Chikatilo was released from his 3-month sentence in December of 1984, and he kind of stayed quiet for a little while. He didn't murder again until August 1985, but during August he had murdered 2 women. At this point the police they just didn't know what to do anymore. They actually then brought in a psychologist or a psychiatrist who would then come up with a forensic profile of who they thought the perpetrator may be. This particular psychiatrist, his name was Alexander Bukhanovsky. He actually came up with a 65-page profile of who this person may be, and there were a number of different things that matched Chikatilo. Someone who had came from a deprived background, someone who had an issue having sexual relationships, and someone just kind of awkward. investigation was ongoing, Chikatilo actually took a break from killing and watched as the investigation was going on. Between 1988 and 1990, the murder count actually rose by another 19. The police upped their investigation, and on the 6th of November 1990, Chikatilo had actually committed his final murder, and the police placed a surveillance on him from this date because of suspicious behaviour that they had noticed. He was then arrested on the 20th of November 1990, again for suspicious behaviour whilst under surveillance. At the time of his arrest, he denied all charges against him. He denied having any involvement in any of these murders, and the police decided they wanted the psychiatrist to speak to him. The psychiatrist sat down with Chikatilo and just started speaking, and as soon as he started talking to him, Chikatilo admitted everything to the psychiatrist. He also then admitted to other murders that the police were unaware of, and he gave the psychiatrist details on where these bodies had been left. He had also stated that with some of his victims, with some of the body parts that he had removed, he had actually eaten some of their organs and would drink their blood. Now again, whether this is true or not, no one is going to know. There were 53 murders that were verified that were all linked to the same murderer. Chikatilo claims to have murdered 56 people, so there could be another 3 that are out there who have never been found. On the 14th of April 1992, he was put on trial, and during his trial, Chikatilo was kept in an iron box where he could be kept away from the family members of the victims. One of the brothers of a female victim actually had thrown a metal object at him, which hit him in the chest, and during the trial, Chikatilo was extremely difficult. He would be singing during the trial and mumbling, and at one point he dropped his trousers and was exposing his genitals to the courtroom. He was just a very difficult person, I think. He was declared sane in court, and they went on with the trial, and he was actually convicted and sentenced to death. Chikatilo appealed the decision of the judge and stated that the psychiatric evaluation was biased and he was claiming insanity. He was then denied this appeal, and his execution went ahead on the 14th of February 1994. He was shot with one bullet into the back of the head and killed immediately. Now, this whole case, I find it so interesting, and I think it's because it's a different country, it's a different government, it's different procedures, everything. This man, I think, was definitely mentally ill, and the insanity plea probably wouldn't have been wrong, but at the same